everyone. Hope everyone's having a great day. Welcome to TEDCO Talks. My name is Troy Lamel Stovall. We are here today with one of my dearest friends here in the state, Renee Winsky with Leadership Maryland, who's an old friend of TEDCO's and just a great servant of the state. So Renee, thanks for talking to us today.
Pleasure to be here, Troy. Thank you.
Cool. Renee, why don't we, I want to start with something a little fun, if you don't mind. And so, want to do kind of a word associate, the old word association game.
Okay.
So say some words, first thing to come to mind. Fair enough?
Yep.
All right, let's try it. We'll start with an easy one. Leadership.
Maryland.
TEDCO.
Love.
COVID.
Ugh.
2020.
Can't wait till it's over.
That's not one word.
Oy vey. Get out of here. Gone.
Renee.
Winsky. No, I love Winsky. It's a good thing.
Chesapeake.
Bay.
Crabs.
Love them.
You can't play the game right, Renee. Well,
Okay.
Thank you for that. I just want to have some fun. Thank you for that. Thank you for indulging me. I appreciate you. But let's talk about Leadership Maryland. So let me, and I'll go ahead and say it's going to be a compound question. So talk about, obviously, let the folks know about Leadership Maryland and what it's about and obviously your role. But talk about it in terms of the role that it's playing with COVID. You know, what's happened with Leadership Maryland explicitly because of COVID. And the last part of my compound question is, as you think about leadership, as you thought about leadership, say in January, and as you see leadership today, and as it becomes, how COVID has changed what leadership means going forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. So Leadership Maryland, there is no 30-second elevator speech.
Go for it.
It's an 8-month program. We take senior executives from every industry sector through an 8-month program. We expose them to the challenges and the issues across our state. We go from Oakland to Ocean City. We like to say we go an inch deep and a mile wide on a lot of different subjects in hopes that when you finish the program, that between your cohort of classmates and all those who have graduated before you or after you, that you're part of this fraternity that just goes and does good things for our state, whether it's in your community, in your profession, in faith, in your children's sports activities, whatever it may be, that you go and take what you've learned and do something better for our state. In terms of what the organization had to do during COVID, we fortunately were in a good financial position thanks to the generosity of all of the people who have gone through our program contributing to our legacy fund. We were able to push the entire class of 2020 into 2021, along with deferring their tuition to do that, which was a difficult decision in some ways and easy in other ways. So in terms of leadership and how I see things have sort of evolved through COVID, so leadership is not magic. Leadership is not something you do alone. You need people around you to lead. And that whole dynamic has obviously changed. You're not physically in the same room with pretty much anybody but your family. And it makes it very hard to lead on a Zoom call. Or conference calls are bad enough because you can't see the body language. But, even in Zoom meetings, not everyone engages with, having their camera on. And, then you've got all these other. So Zoom is good for the Brady Bunch look, but Teams and Google Meets and some of the other platforms, you can't see everybody, and it's hard to lead a group of people when you're not there with them. But I have seen some tremendous leaders take advantage of what has been put before them in terms of COVID and do some wonderful things. I'm very proud of our governor. You know, everybody might not agree with what he's doing, but he's in a tough spot. And, you know, I think in general, you know, most people are well, until the craziness of the last couple of weeks, have been pleased with his leadership. And I think that's a very interesting style of leadership that has resonated all the way up to the national level with the national governors and what he did with Vice President Pence and at the federal level representing all the states. I was impressed with all of that.
Cool. You said several things I want to kind of double click on that you said. I want to go back to Leadership Maryland, and I'll use a little different word, but I think you'll see if you agree, is the connective tissue. It sounds like what you talked about is how do you build the connective tissue. So talk a little bit more about that connection and how connections are made, and even have a story that can kind of elaborate how two people who maybe didn't know each other, but because of Leadership Maryland, they built their own little connective tissue and their own little village, if you will.
Right. So lots of great examples. So the program starts with an orientation. And in a normal year, everyone is in the room together. Obviously, you do some feel-good things. You get to know people. And as you go through the year and you look at the issues of education and health and human services, criminal justice, the environment, multiculturalism and diversity, you become it's a more trusted environment. It's a very safe environment. So by the time we get to the multiculturalism and diversity session in October, you know these people so well that your veneer, we like to say that everyone has a veneer, and at some point during the course of the program, that veneer just goes away. And you say something out loud in front of 50 people and you think, oh my God, did I really just say that? And did I say it in front of 50 people? Yeah, you did, because you've just developed this trust and this ability to speak freely, knowing that we call it Vegas rules. What's said in the room stays in the room. And that is class to class. And it's just quite a special thing. Some examples of things that have happened out of a particular class. I have two really good examples. In '06, Tom Jarbo and a couple of people from the Southern Maryland region were in the program. And as we went around the state, they realized that there are other local and county-based regional programs. And they thought, well, why don't we have one down here in Southern Maryland? So they got together with all of the graduates from Leadership Maryland before them, from St. Mary's, Calvert, and Charles County, and they stood up Leadership Southern Maryland. And it's now been, I believe, 12 years, and hundreds of graduates from that program. Another wonderful example is an organization called the Clarion Call. Janice Liggins was in the class of, I believe, 11, and she was very moved when they visited the prison, which is part of our program, and to learn that most of the men in that system never got past a third grade reading level. And that bothered her. And for her, that was her clarion call. She created a new nonprofit. Some of her class members were on her board and are still on her board. And she created a program in Prince George's County that is reaching out to families, particularly those who have some sort of justice issues, if you will, in the family with the father or the mother or both or whatever it may be, and keeping young boys and girls busy and learning and reading. And she's now retired from her day job, and she's now running the nonprofit full time.
Oh, those are two great stories. But I love the veneer. You know, I went through leadership, Greater Washington, and so it's funny that whole veneer that you can walk into a room with 50, 60 people that most of them you don't know, and all of a sudden you're sharing and you're opening up and with some very intimate pieces. And to your point, that's how those connective tissues are built.
Yeah.
Because you didn't use the word, but it's being vulnerable. How do you allow yourself to be vulnerable?
And it takes time. We could never have had that conversation at orientation in April. It has to
Mhm.
happen in October. You need that time on the bus, as we say, to have that level of comfort, and to have the level of comfort that um, what you say won't be held against you,
Sure.
even if people don't necessarily agree with you. It could
What,
be diametrically opposed to you, but there's a respect and a trust that develops that over the course of the program. And with many people, it remains years and years after.
yeah. What's one of your fears as you moving to COVID, kind of as you can't do the bus, to your point of having, what's one of your fears that's going to get lost, but what's also one of your hopes that's going to get maybe amplified as you kind of move to a different platform because of COVID?
So I think we're probably going to be in some sort of a hybrid model where normally we'd all be in a ballroom at the Cambridge Hyatt in April with 52 people at this giant circle of tables that look something like the UN. And we do all these exercises and we stand close together and then we separate on further apart. And, we're not going to be able to do those things. So, and we used to always, it was required, it was mandatory. You had to be in the room.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that's going to be the case come April.
Mhm.
Not yet, at least. Maybe 2022 we'll be able to do all that again. But
Right.
trying to figure out how to accommodate safely those who want to be in the room, and then accommodate those who want to participate virtually, and still make it feel real and special and LMD like. Same thing, throughout the programmatic sessions. In May, we would normally go to Southern Maryland. We would
Mhm.
go to Pax River and spend half a day there. I don't think that's going to happen. But are there videos? Are there things? Could
Mhm.
we bring in one of the commanders of the base to talk to us about what they're doing? So
Mhm.
just trying different ways to get at the places and the conversations that we've had in the past, knowing that we may have some people in the room, but we're going to have people participating virtually as well.
Cool. So I want to talk about you. What I loved about getting to know you is just your service and your servant leadership to Maryland. I think folks need to hear your story, and clearly you're connected to TEDCO through the years, and you're still connected to TEDCO. So why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit about Renee and your history of serving the state of Maryland and TEDCO?
Yep. So I'm a born and raised Marylander. My first, real job, if you will, after college was the city of Greenbelt. I was the public information officer. Went on to National League of Cities. I spent Maryland Municipal League and then National League of Cities. I came back to Maryland to work at TEDCO when it was a brand new organization in 1998 statute, 1999, in terms of beginning to do some work with them. I was employee number 2, very proudly. My TEDCO colleagues will hear me say I bleed TEDCO, and I always will. Um, and then I left TEDCO to go to the Tech Council of Maryland. I had a great
Mhm.
opportunity to work with the life sciences and IT and tech community there. Um, then I came back to my county. I was a little tired of the commute to Rockville, which was very tough back then. Started up my own consulting firm, Bay One Group. I still have that, no clients currently, but worked with Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation and the Chesapeake Innovation Center. And then my predecessor at Leadership Maryland announced her retirement, and I threw my name in the hat. I was one of over 100 people who threw their name in the
Oh,
hat.
wow.
And I, to this day, 7 years in, am still the lucky one to have gotten this job.
Well, we appreciate you. I appreciate you, and the state appreciates you. And you didn't mention, so you clearly serve on a couple of TEDCO boards, and
Mhm.
so I appreciate you. You're the vice chair for MII, and you want to talk a little bit about MII? Let folks know about MII.
Sure. So the Maryland Innovation Initiative is a state-funded program. We work with the research institutions in the state of Maryland, really to fund early stage, very early stage technology in hopes, and companies in hopes to uh, grow jobs and opportunity and we've had about $39 million invested. If I remember correctly, 102 startups,
Got it.
as
You
well
got the
as
numbers.
100 plus jobs created.
Yep.
And I've only been on MII for a couple of years. I am President Emeritus Mike Miller's appointee to the MII. And our leadership, Bob Hollenbach, Bob has been a great chair of
Absolutely.
MII.
Yep.
The staff is great. The other people that I serve with, all the universities, College Park and Baltimore County and UMB and Hopkins and UMBC, just a great bunch of people who work very hard to move what their researchers are doing on their campuses into our everyday lives.
No, it's I just left a meeting of the Life Science Advisory Board, and Artie was presenting the impact. And so one of the comments, and sure she'll come back to the board to tell you all, is that they loved it. They loved the impact. They loved the story of MII. But what they brought up was that we might be undercounting the numbers. And I think we are. I think overall TEDCO, I think we're undercounting numbers. I think I haven't had a chance to talk to you or the board about is we've got to rethink the statistical analysis that we do to count impact and how we do that. So I'm thinking through the resources we need at TEDCO holistically to look at all the impact that we're actually generating for the state of Maryland.
So that doesn't surprise me. I remember in the early days of TEDCO, we were trying to figure out how to validate and judge our impact. And what we looked at was follow-on funding. For every dollar through the state that we put into a company or a project, what was the follow-on? Was there SBIR? Was there venture? And now there are so many other ways to slice and dice it. But we thought, oh, we'll never get more than $25 on the dollar. We have all known that got blown away.
Exactly.
But yeah, you have to reevaluate how you evaluate. I mean, there are new data points to ponder. So I'm not surprised at all.
So no, it was a great meeting, and Artie did an outstanding job of telling the story around that, which, let's talk about COVID even more. You mentioned it already, but COVID is here. We pray it's not here to stay, but it's here, and we're having to pivot. You talked about how Leadership Maryland had to pivot, but I want to drill even more on, how leadership, because you mentioned it already, how leaders have to rethink what they are doing in order to manage our way through this. And, I think you've heard me talk about, this too, I believe this too shall pass, but this too will create different behaviors and different things that we're going to have to do. I think, the notion of 5 days in the office probably is a dead thing.
Right.
I think we're going to have a different way in which we're going to gather and meet, as you just talked about. So my question to you is, as you think about that for yourself as a leader, but also as you clearly are one of the key leaders to lead others and help others become better leaders, how are you thinking about that, and how are you thinking about changing some of the messaging of what you got to teach people how to be better leaders in this post-COVID world?
So I think there's a couple things, and these are characteristics of good leaders that I think are characteristics of good leaders that shouldn't change.
Yeah.
For example, good leaders listen. They listen first. And it's not always an easy thing to master, particularly if you're in practice mode and others are not. But listening will forever be a standard characteristic of a good leader. You still need to surround yourself with good people, and better leaders surround themselves with people that are unlike themselves. You need diversity of cultures, of experiences, of values. I like to say you need the experience of ages. You need wisdom, but you need youthful innovation and free-spiritedness from our millennials, etc. So you need to surround yourself with a combination of people in order to deal with COVID in particular, but all the other things that companies and businesses and nonprofits are dealing with. And I think those standard characteristics of leadership will survive, will continue, and will be the backbone of good leaders going forward.
Yeah. So one of the things that I agree, I love your point about the millennials. One of my observations, see if you agree with that, and I've always messed up when, Gen X, Gen Z, I never know when to cut the line off, but I just don't know. But I talk about kind of the 40-ish and below, because most of them grew up what I call the video game generation, right? And so if you think about the video game, number one, they're not going to be the ones who work 30 years and stay at the company for 30 years and get the
Right.
whole watch. That model for them doesn't exist. But the other thing for me, and see if you agree, is that because of this video game influence, they're always about the next skill level. And so as someone who's managing them, it's not so much a promotion as we also have to give the next, once they've attained a certain skill, they need the next skill and the next skill. And so we as leaders and managers have to make sure that we're having an organization that is growing enough to allow them that next skill level to be attained. Otherwise they leave.
Right. You have to enable. You have to be an enabler. A good leader does enable, and it enables people of all skill sets and all backgrounds. Everyone should always want to learn more.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a leader and you exhibit that and you enable that within your company or within your organization, you're going to be much better off in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And to the point you just made, what one of many things that COVID has exposed is the inequities that have always been there. Again, whether it's about race or gender or even socioeconomics. And so as you think about that, what does that mean for Leadership Maryland in terms of diversity and inclusion? I actually like the word expansion as well, but diversity and inclusion. How does that influence what you do at Leadership Maryland? How does it influence just who Renee is and how Renee thinks about the world?
Sure. So for Leadership Maryland, we have always, through our selection process, looked at age, gender, ethnicity, profession, and geographic region within the state. And in terms of profession, we're looking at public, private sector, we're looking at all levels of government, all levels of education, everything in one. One of my favorite things to watch in a particular class is age. Because everyone has that. Everyone has an age. It's one thing we all share. We may be male, we may be female, we may have a different culture, we are all an age, and we bring it. If you're 26 or 65, and to see that develop in a class over the course of 8 months, I find to be one of the most fascinating things to watch. But we have always tried to be as diverse as we can in every class. We try to mirror that in our board of directors and in our various committees. But I think what has happened over the course of the last few months is we need to look a little bit differently at how we have our conversations about diversity and inclusion. We have a mechanism that we've used for many years. It's called open space technology. Has absolutely nothing to do with technology, but it's a process, a facilitation process that we've used that we can't do till October because we have to build up that trust throughout the year. But it gives people an opportunity to make a statement and then have a conversation about it. And I remember, some of the interesting questions were, why can't white men jump? Another was, well, what's wrong with the name Washington Redskins? And then others are more personal. Not me personally, but the statement was, I'm in my 60s. I have a 27-year-old son who has a severe disability. What will happen to him when I die? And who will take care of him? You can only do so much. And so you have these personal, candid conversations, and some get deep into racism and slavery and go back to, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And, but because we have that safe place to talk about it, but we need to take it a little further. We need to take the discussion a little bit further. And we're talking about that right now. We're working with our planning committee to try and figure out how to have some deeper conversations. Perhaps there are some different facilitation tools and different people. I mean, I remember after Freddie Gray and the unrest in Baltimore in 2015, it happened in April, and we were going to do our June session in Baltimore, and we were going to go to the harbor, and we were going to look at the economic impact of the new towers, the new crane towers at the port, and what that was going to mean for the region and for Baltimore, and the double stack trains and Howard Street Tunnel and all that. And then the unrest happened, and I thought, we can't go to Baltimore and not talk about that. So we completely revised the program in 4 weeks. We wound up having the pastor, I wish I could, Pastor Hickman,
yeah.
come in and talk with the group.
Yeah.
We met at the Humanum building, in the old brewery building, which is just across the street from the Transformation Center that burned to the ground over on Gay Street. We took our class by bus over to Mandawan Mall, and we talked with the folks at Center for Urban Families that year. And then we took the bus all the way across town. And to some people, all they saw was a map. And they saw, oh, fires are here and fires are here. And there's unrest here at Mandawan Mall. And then there's these things. And they just thought, oh, it's just down the street. Well, it's not down the street. It's across the city. And things happened all over. And to them, it was, we showed them just the vastness of, yeah, it happened in Baltimore. But in Baltimore, it happened in Baltimore, in various places in Baltimore. And it was kind of eye-opening to a lot of people who just saw little flame pictures on a map and said, it's burning. That whole building burned down, and there it is rebuilt a year later. So it was pretty moving for our
class. Without naming anybody or causing anybody any, is there some story you can tell us how someone's view of the life shifted because of that experience? Because look, while you're thinking about it, I agree with you. I think the challenge we have, and again, as a Black man, the challenge we have is we're afraid to say things. This is an emotional conversation, right? It's emotional. There's a lot of emotions. And we're afraid to say things because we don't want to hear what you might have to say. And white people don't want to, afraid because but there's things that just need to be said. And we need to allow the anger, sometimes the questions, and sometimes there are questions that to me might seem silly, or to you might seem silly, but because we all effectively live in little bubbles. And what you really are talking about is, how do you get people out of their bubble? And how do you allow me to question my bubble?
So I don't have a particular instance. Well, there was an occasion in a class not too long ago where someone, a person of color, felt like they were not able to speak freely. And at one point, they got the gumption to say that. And there were a lot of people in the room like, oh, well, why do you feel that way? And you shouldn't feel that way. And they meant it. They really meant that she shouldn't feel that way. And just by having that little bit of conversation, it was amazing to see how the next session, a lot of people opened up more, because they were beginning to realize, okay, this is the safe place. So I can say it here.
How do you, or have you thought about, how does that conversation expand beyond Leadership Maryland and the cohorts of Leadership Maryland? How does that become a conversation that Maryland can have, and Maryland can help the nation? Look, we're not trying to make a political statement. There is some healing that needs to happen right now, regardless of, forget the politics. There is real division. There's real mistrust. There's real division. And so what you're saying is, I do agree, is a platform for that. So how do you scale that to have more than just Leadership Maryland?
Well, I don't know that organizationally that's what we do.
Gotcha.
We expect our people to do that.
There you go.
We expect those who've gone through the program, experienced, met the colleague who's on the other side of the fence, and you've both come together at the gate, and then you move forward and do something together in your community. It's local. It's in your church. It's in your children's school. It's on the soccer field. We want our people to go, like I said earlier, and do good. And if it means carrying a flag of a different color, or approaching a group that you would not normally have reached out to. It's going out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
And again, the organization isn't necessarily going to do that, but we will provide the opportunity. We can convene and we
Mhm.
can give you a safe place for the conversation.
Mhm.
But the expectation is that you need to do this, and you need to do it whether you do it alone or with people in your cohort or with people who have come before you and graduated, or those that will come after you who have graduated.
So I want that, because that's such a beautiful way. I want to kind of use that as a place to kind of stop and transition and just kind of open it up to you and see if you had something you want to kind of talk about as we close this out.
You know, you'd mentioned that I am involved with a couple things there at TEDCO. Another is Maryland Venture Fund.
Yep.
And we were talking about COVID. And one of the things that I was really excited about is that back in June, we funded a company called ClearMask through the builder and the seed
See.
fund.
Hmm.
And wow, what a great
A
story
great story.
for those funds, the little bit of money that that company got, and what they have done for doctors and nurses and those on the front lines. And, you know, I just think about the little patient, the young child who has COVID, and the doctor or the nurse can look at them through the clear mask and treat them. And I'm like, I just thought that was the neatest thing. That, yeah, thumbs up on that. Yeah, you can have that money, because I think that's going to go a long way. I do enjoy my work with MII and Maryland Venture Fund and all the seed funds at TEDCO. I do bleed TEDCO, as I said earlier. Employee number 2, and you can't take that away from me. So
Well, you did mention it's not connected to TEDCO clearly, but there's a lot of TEDCO representation on the e-innovation board as
yes.
well. So you want to talk about that?
Sure. So the innovation is a program that is housed at Commerce, and it was started by the legislature to endow um, projects, programs, professorships, if you will, at any college or university across the state of Maryland. It was not limited to just the system campuses. It was every college, community college, local college, private. And we have, I don't even know how many millions we have given out. I believe this is our 8th year, maybe.
Hmm.
I've only been on for a couple of years now, but it's so gratifying to see. Micah got a grant. Washington
In college,
College got a
exactly. I was going to say
grant.
exactly. Yep.
College of Southern Maryland is still working on theirs.
Yep.
So University of Maryland Eastern Shore trying
Yep.
to do something around entrepreneurship and construction
Construction.
management
Yeah.
in Somerset County. I mean, just that money, it's almost double the impact when you can go out to some of these smaller institutions to provide them with a professorship. And the money that's matched. I mean, it's a match. We may give them $1 million, but they're getting $1 million from someone local who really cares about that campus and that particular program, whether it's environmental or entrepreneurship or art design related, whatever it is. So that's also been a very exciting program to be a part of.
Yeah, I think particularly folks in Maryland, but even outside of Maryland who may be viewing this, we want to be clear with MII and with the innovation. These are funds that are available. For like MII, we have a private institution, Hopkins, that is participating in this. So
Mm-hmm.
it's private and the public. And the same thing with innovation. We have, as Renee mentioned, we have both the public institutions and our private institutions that have participated in this. And so I think Maryland is very unique in supplying these type of funds to both public and private institutions of higher
Mm-hmm.
learning. So it's a magic. It's a lot of good stuff.
Well, over the years, I think that the Maryland General Assembly has been brilliant in some of the programs that they have come up with, you know, even dating back to 1998 when they developed TEDCO. But, you know, MII and the innovation and, you know, Maryland Venture Fund. So a lot of these programs came out of the General Assembly. And I think that, you know, MII and innovation, we've been good stewards.
Hmm.
And I think that we need to continue to do that.
Absolutely. Well, look, Renee, thank you for your time. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your friendship and your support. I personally appreciate it, and the state of Maryland does as well. So appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is Troy Stovall with TEDCO Talks, and we'll see you again. Take care, Renee. Have a good one, and have a great Thanksgiving.
You too. Thanks.